Mr. Mayor, before we ask the public to step up, may I make a few comments, please?
Sure.
I was contacted by a couple of members of the public in advance of today's meeting, and there seemed to have been some misunderstanding because people were asking for my proposal. My proposal at this juncture consists of the task force's recommended civilian review board, which is found at Appendix G of the task force's report. The reason for tonight's public hearing is that I would like public input as to any of the aspects of that proposal. Specifically, there are some that I would like to discuss. I know that there are a lot of people who want to see this enacted exactly as written, but I have a number of concerns that I would like to see and hear some public input on in particular. So for one, for example, while the proposal does say that the mayor would select the members of the board with the consent of the city council, I'd be open to any suggestion as to how the screening of candidates for the review board would take place, what pool of applicants there would be from which the members of the board would be chosen. And I'm interested in hearing input from the public on that. Second, there is some concern in my mind about a provision in the proposed review board that mandates mediation. There's a step in the procedure that, as proposed, is mandatory mediation, and there may well be circumstances in which mediation would not be appropriate. Again, I would ask for public comment on that. Should mediation be at the request of the complainant? Should it be with the consent of both sides? Or should it be mandatory? I think there are certainly scenarios in which mandatory mediation could create an enormous amount of pressure against a complainant. Hypothetically, let's say, for the sake of argument, there's a situation where someone alleges that a police officer sexually harassed a individual complainant. That complainant may very well have excellent reasons for not wishing to participate in a mediation session with the person that he or she alleges was the perpetrator of sexual harassment. That's just a hypothetical example of where mandatory mediation might not be appropriate, and that's why I ask for public comment on that. Additionally, there's a provision in the proposal that deals with the administrative hearing that would occur in the event there is no resolution of the grievance at the mediation stage. In particular, the language that's used in the proposal says the observance of the standard rules of evidence. Now, I'll be very honest, I've been an attorney for 33 years, and there are parts of the standard rules of evidence that I have difficulty with. And if a self-represented individual wishes to pursue a complaint at the hearing stage, if we require that person who doesn't have an attorney to follow and understand the standard rules of evidence that would be applicable in a civil proceeding, I think we're asking too much. Perhaps what should happen here is that the Civilian Review Board might have some leeway here, that if we have an individual who is not represented by counsel, perhaps the CRB themselves might make inquiry of the complainant or of other witnesses. Something in the nature of a legislative hearing where the legislators who are members of the committee who are conducting the hearing do the questioning of a witness. That, I think, would relieve some of the burden that would otherwise be imposed on a private citizen who is faced with, according to this, following the rules of evidence that would apply in a civil proceeding, which are very complicated matters. So there is a provision in the recommendation that allows the CRB to craft its own policies and procedures, so maybe that should be broadened with some specific language that says that they can adopt their own rules, perhaps within the confines of the Administrative Procedure Act, which, for example, in New York would allow the admission of hearsay testimony as long as there is some non-hearsay evidence that tends to corroborate the hearsay statements. Those are the kinds of things I think that I would welcome an opinion from the public on. So the hope that I have is, after hearing some public comment for, against, some proposed tweaks perhaps to the Appendix G proposal of the task force, which obviously was the result of an awful lot of work and a lot of input from a lot of different people. After we hear all of that, my intention would be to draft a proposed ordinance that would ultimately be subject to additional public scrutiny before being considered for passage by the City Council as a whole. Thank you.
Thank you.